Good morning, traders. Welcome to Trading Together. I'm Mel Gacee. Today is Wednesday, April the 8th. How's everybody doing today? Welcome, welcome. If you are here, I just want to say thank you. And if you are here, I would love it if you would say hi, drop your name in the chat, and ask me any questions or comments that you might have because this is a friendly, interactive stream. I want to help traders of all levels. I'm going to take some trades live today if we get the right setups. And we're going to do some market analysis and I will answer any questions or comments you might have. And this is also just for educational purposes. So as I take live trades, I'm not recommending any trades to you, but if you choose to follow, you do so at your own risk. All right, guys. Well, let's look at this market. So we had a pretty big push down in the market after the open, after an amazing overnight run. It's been incredible. So right now it is starting to recover off of this low that it has just recently made, starting to get a little move up, pushing maybe back up toward the VWAP. Let's see what we get here. The MACD just now turning a little bit green. And I have been in some calls. I'm going to go ahead and average those calls and see what we get here. All right. Nice push up here. What we want to see is a test here of the VWAP. That would be great. And we're going to look at our daily chart. I want to show you the incredible gap up that we had this morning. So we're still trading at about 2% higher than yesterday's close, which is pretty significant. That's a pretty wild run there. And let's take a look at this daily chart. All right. And again, if you're here this morning, drop your name in the chat. I would love to say hi to you. Get over here. There we go. All right, let's look at our daily chart here. All right, here's our SPX. We'll move to the daily. Take a look at this candle. Wowza, right? What a wild gap. Look at that gap. Incredible. 2% gap up overnight. What did we do? This is a very busy chart. I've added some Fibonacci numbers here, so it's a little hard to read, but look at this incredible move here. We came all the way down. Let's scooch this down so you can see. Gavilan, good morning. Good to see you. Thanks for saying hi. All right. We've got our all-time high here at 7,002 on the SPX. We came all the way down from the end of January to the end of March, and we hit a bottom here at 6,300, almost exactly a 10% drop, right? And then we got a bounce. We had a little trouble on getting back up over this 200. Took many, many days to try and attempt that. We just weren't doing it. And then what did we get yesterday? Well, we got this tweet, not a tweet, excuse me, a news report from President Trump saying that there was going to be a 2-week ceasefire as long as Iran was going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So the ceasefire was agreed to, and the market went insane overnight. Oil tumbled, and we moved up almost 3% overnight. Pretty crazy, wild move up there. And you can see that right here on the chart. I'm going to pull this Fibonacci off. Diane, good morning. And Tatiana, good morning. Good to see you. I am going to remove this drawing here so it's a little bit easier to read. But basically, you can see this wild gap. Look at that. Okay. And then we pushed with this gap all the way up to our overhead resistance right now, which is sitting at 6,800. That's our overhead resistance. We rejected off of that. We've come down, and right now we're holding 6750 roughly is the area that we're holding right now. So this candle has pulled way back off the top, still barely green. It was red at one point. And let's see now what if they can continue to push this up today, or we're just going to hold sideways, or are we going to pull back into this gap area? This is a pretty big gap area. It will fill at some point. It doesn't have to fill today. It's a huge gap. I'm doubtful it would fill today, but it will fill at some point. The question now is, now that we have recaptured the 200, we've moved up pretty extensively. We're almost back into this range that we were in at the, kind of the beginning of the year. We were in this sideways range. We've moved back up into that area almost, right? Let me zoom out a little so you can see what I'm talking about. This was our kind of sideways range for a good amount of time as we were coming out of the end of the year into the beginning of the year. We were moving sideways in a range. That range was mostly about 6,800 to 6,900, roughly, about a 100-point range. We're right there. 6,800 is the top of today's candle. So we are right here at the bottom of this range. Are they going to continue? This is a massive V-shaped recovery. Are they going to continue to push up and recover this range and maybe go for an all-time high? Or are they going to turn and pull it back down? Well, I do think by summer, we will be pulling back down into the range of where we've been, right? This area right down here. I do think by summer, we're going to be back down here. Doesn't have to be, right? Doesn't have to happen that way. But I feel like chances are good that we do still have some downward movement left in the market. However, this is the really important thing to remember. Markets are designed to go up. They just are. Markets move up. And so overall, in the long run, in the big view, markets are designed to go up. But what we do is great here because we are scalping and we're day trading. So we get to be light on our feet. We get to take advantage of these moves down and these moves up. And that is, that's one of the biggest benefits of being a day trader and a scalper. So let's take a look and see, should we try and trade any puts here? Let's take a look at this chart. It looks like maybe we could. We've been under the VWAP all morning. Let me get back to my minute chart. So we pulled back from the high. We opened up at the high and we've just really been slowly pulling back from there all morning. And do we want to look at puts here? We've got a little bottom right now. This is looks like a little bottom to me. Could we drop down below that? Sure, absolutely, we could. Let's give this a watch and see what we get. VIX is sitting at 2180. So certainly it did get a push down from where it was. It's still over 20, which is slightly elevated, but certainly much, much farther down than where it was. In fact, it's down 15% today. Big, big move on the VIX to the downside. VIX, of course, the volatility index that measures basically fear in the market. That's what the VIX measures. And as the VIX comes up, the market moves down. As the VIX moves down, the market comes up. So we do see the VIX getting a big drop down today, 15% drop down. Still slightly elevated at 21.7, at least right now. All right. So I'm just kind of watching this put. I didn't act on this put. I'm just kind of watching it here because this does look to me like a bit of a bottom, at least temporarily, sitting at 671 on the SPY. All right, so that put didn't quite play out just yet. Looks like we might get a bit of a sideways movement here. We're still up 139 points. So that's pretty good. Obviously, really good move, over 2% move to the upside. The other thing that happened is we got a big push on Bitcoin. Bitcoin now up over 71, so that was nice for Bitcoin. All right, let's see if we can get another push upward here. MACD looking a little bit weak, tiny little candles here, well, bars. Usually when you see that, it's telling you we're sideways. Craig, good morning. Good to see you. So again, mostly today, just a pretty consistent drop from the open. Here's the high pre-market at about 7:30 Eastern, and we've really just kind of been dropping from that high. Now, this to me, again, looks like it could be a bit of a temporary bottom. 67.81 on the ES, basically 67.40 on the SPX. And I do think 67.50 might be an area of support. So this does look like a short-term bottom. Let's see what we do from here. Right now, like I said, making tiny candles, not too much volume. MACD isn't really doing much. See how teeny these little bars are. Again, that just tells you range, no volume, no volatility. So let's see what we do here. And let's take a look at our VIX. Hey, David Tucci, good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right, let's take a look at our VIX here. We're going to look at the daily because what we've been talking about for months now has suddenly changed. Big change here. So, in fact, I think we just drew this line yesterday. This trend line where I was illustrating that the VIX has been slowly moving up over the last 4 months. The low that we saw, this low right here, was actually Christmas Eve, right? And we've been moving up and up and up with this rising bottom on the VIX. We kind of blipped through it here, but this is different. This is a huge gap down on the VIX with just a big move to the downside. Now that broke right through this trend line, Guy is here. Good morning. Thanks for saying hi, you guys. I sure appreciate it. Um, so yeah, big gap down on the VIX, breaking through the trend line. So now remember, the VIX, the volatility index, letting us know when there's fear in the market, slowly rising over these last 4 months, letting us know fear was rising, fear was rising, fear was rising. And then we get the news report yesterday, shortly after the close of the market, that there would be a 2 week ceasefire. I'll be honest and say, I mean, for the human side of it, I am really grateful. There's a human cost, and we can't ever underestimate that. We do have to trade these things, but there's it's nothing. It's just a sad situation when people die, civilians die. They're not responsible for the regime in Iran, and that leadership is, I mean, we all know, but the people themselves have protested that leadership. And it's sad to see that there is a human cost to all of this. But that being said, we still have to trade it. And so, this report comes out, there's a ceasefire, there's a 2 week ceasefire. Supposedly the strait is going to get open. Supposedly Iran and or US are going to escort ships or vessels through there. um, I don't know about you all. How long is this ceasefire going to last? I I don't know. Iran was already reportedly firing on the UAE and Kuwait, even as before the ink was dry on this agreement. So, you know, is this a what's going to happen here, right? If this ceasefire doesn't hold up, and my suspicion is that it won't, are we right back down into the dumps again? Oil did tumble today, but it has slowly been climbing. Let's take a look at oil here. Um, Crude down 15%. Wowza. We do need to look at those charts. We'll look at those charts here in just a minute. But yeah, so oil dumped. It's my thought process that the ceasefire probably won't hold up. And that's sad to say, but we'll just have to play it out. As far as trading goes, the big idea is we get to trade this daily. We get to trade what the charts give us, and that's what really matters. We're able to be light on our feet, pivot, and move where we need to move, and that's the beauty of day trading. All right. Good morning. Let's see. Is that QDNIK, QD Nico? Can I call you Nico, or what do you prefer to be called? Welcome, and thank you so much for joining, and thank you for saying hi. You guys know how much I appreciate your company here. Good morning, Val. Good to see you. Yes. All right, Nico. Well, good to have you here, and I appreciate you jumping in and saying hi. Thank you so much. All right, so that's kind of our analysis on the VIX. So again, remember the fear gauge, it was moving up, huge gap down. This gap is going to have to fill, just like the gap on the S&P 500 and on the SPY. Those gaps are going to have to fill. Doesn't have to happen today or tomorrow or even next month, but those gaps will fill. So let's see what happens with this ceasefire. Let's see, do we continue to move on up in this market, or is this a really nice rip your face off rally in the middle of a downtrending market? Let's figure it out. We'll watch that together. The idea that we need to remember on this daily S&P chart is that we have blown right up through this 200. We've blown right up through all of these supports and resistance. Now, this creates a market imbalance. All of this space in here is going to have to be reconciled. So it is going to have to come back at some point. But the idea is we've been able to really create a nice looking V shape here. So we're coming down, and then boom, this V is all the way up to here. We've retraced, I think, roughly 70% of this downturn. That's pretty impressive. So right now, we're bullish. This is a higher high. This is a reclaim of the 200. This is super bullish, and we need to treat it as bullish for the moment. Now, look at this candle that we're creating today. This candle is kind of a little bit of a warning saying, look at this upper wick, and we're kind of, the body of the candle is sort of moving down here. Not great. That's not great. So we need to see if this candle, we've got a long day ahead of us. We've still got several hours, but is this candle going to turn and push back up, or are we going to sort of start to fade this move? A lot of times when we see a strong move up, we do see the fade. So that is possible. All right, Craig, if the daily candle were to close as it is, would it be bearish? The candle itself, Craig, yes, is bearish right now, because we've got a long upper wick. It is showing green, but the body is tiny. The body is representing that bulls and bears are fighting it out at this level. The bulls have pulled it all the way up here, but they couldn't keep it up there. The bears have pulled it down. The higher upper wick makes it bearish, but its position on the chart is bullish because of this huge gap. So the position on the chart is very, very bullish. The candle itself, as of right now, is slightly bearish because of the high upper wick. Now, would we expect to see a continued down? We could, right? Let's see if we can see, look left and see, have we ever seen this type of gap up before, and what does that look like? Let's look left a little bit. That's my favorite thing to do when we're trying to estimate what's going on moving forward. I always like to look left on the chart. That'll tell you. Most of the time, that'll tell you the story. Guy saying it's an inverted hammer and not quite a gravestone. Not quite a gravestone yet, Guy. You are correct. Not quite a hammer yet. The hammer is going to need the body to come down a little bit lower, but getting there, absolutely. So I could see that forming for sure. Shooting star is exactly what it is, Guy. That's exactly what this candle is a shooting star. That is the name of a candle that appears. I love the Japanese candlestick names. It appears in the night sky, and it starts to come down, the shooting star. And that is what this looks like right now, which is, by the way, a bearish candle. The shooting star is a bearish candle. Okay. And we are still moving really sideways here on this chart. So no trade at the moment, but we're watching. Let's look left and see, when have we seen this type of a gap up and how did we behave? These are not common. Here is a smaller gap up. Not really the same. I'm not going to call that the same level of gap. This gap is much more significant. So let's keep looking left. Kind of a gap up here, continued up. Fairly significant gap up here, continued up. Decent gap here, continued up. Nothing super huge like we're seeing today. Here's a bit of a kind of a shooting star situation, a little bit of a gap up, and then it continued down. Really hard to find any gap here in the last 5 years that's quite as big as today's. I'll have to do a little study on that and see when the last time is that we saw an almost 3-point gap up, because that's pretty impressive. But a lot of the gaps we're seeing, looking left, little gap there, came down. A lot of the gaps that we're seeing did continue up. Here's a gap up here off of a bottom, and it went down. Gap here off of a sort of a bottom, went up the next day. So this gap is fairly significant. Wasn't really forming a bottom like we are now. So it's a little bit of a different market dynamic, but it did continue up there. That's a decent sized gap there. 57.84 to 58.67. Gap, gap, gap. Decent gap off of a sort of a bottom, did continue up. This is a similar kind of a situation. Little bit of a bottom. We were much higher than that with a gap, and it did continue up for a bit. So it's possible that we continue to see an upward movement, but this candle, as Craig was asking, is at the candle in a standalone situation is a bearish candle. All right. So right now, let's see what kind of trades we've got. It's a sideways, nothing happening market right now. The main move happened overnight. They did not let retail capitalize on this move up. Oh, by the way, look at the SPY candle. That candle is more bearish than the SPX candle. Let's take a look. I'll show you. Let me turn off the volume profile so you can see it better. So here's the SPY gap up. This candle looks much more bearish, doesn't it? Pretty red. All right, Craig, since you're a 0DTE trader, why do you pay attention to the daily candles? I love your questions, Craig. You have the best questions. And it's a really good question because as a 0DTE trader, who cares what's going on in the major market? We see a move, we take it. No, not the way I trade. And can you trade that way, kind of with blinders on, and we're just zoomed in on what's right in front of us? Yes, and we should be zoomed in on what's in front of us. But we have to know what the landscape is, right? We have to know what is the major overall bias of the market, because when you know that, it gives you a little bit of an advantage. You want to trade with the trend and not against it. And so knowing what the bias is helps you to understand the trend. We're not always right? We can't always guess the bias, but by zooming out, it gives you a better idea. And when you know the bias, you can trade with the trend. And when you trade with the trend, you're going to be more profitable. So great question, Craig. I really appreciate your questions. And you're exactly right. We want to zoom in on today's movements and we want to really know, but we want to know that in the context of the bigger picture. What's going on in the bigger picture? And today what's going on is we've got a major move up, which is currently in the process of pulling back. And so that SPY candle is looking a little negative right there. All right, Guy, if I may contribute, I think the daily chart is the most important chart you can use. Thank you, Guy. I would agree with you. I refer back to the daily chart many times a day, and for exactly why I just said, to get an idea of the bigger landscape. So yeah, thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. All right, so this SPY candle definitely giving us this downward movement at the moment. All right, yes, it's where I start my day for the macro viewpoint. Exactly. Very good. Excellent. Yep. Me too. For the macro view, I'm looking at the daily, I'm looking at pre-market, I'm looking at sometimes the weekly and the monthly. In fact, this is a good time to take a look at the weekly, isn't it? Let's do that. Look at that. The weekly gives you even a bigger zoomed out perspective. And look at that candle that's forming on the weekly. Two really strong green candles and giving us a really looking on the weekly like a V-shaped recovery for sure. Very strong 2 weekly candles. Now we're at Wednesday, so let's see what happens with the rest of the week. Are we going to continue to move up? It's possible. It's possible. Like I said, with that kind of shooting star daily, we'll see if we get a pullback. A lot of times you'll see a big move up. You see this a lot of times after earnings reports, right? So I'm not talking about the SPY at this moment. I'm talking about things like NVIDIA or Tesla or these big giants that have these earning reports. You'll see after earnings insane moves. They'll get these big up moves, and almost always you'll see that retrace a little bit. So let's take a quick look at the SPX on the weekly, looking much the same. I'm going to go back to the daily, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about on these big earnings reports. So let's zoom out here a little bit and see if I can find. NVIDIA is famous for these. A lot of these big tech stocks are famous for these big, wild gaps after earnings. Let's see if I can find one. Here's a wild gap up. Look at this after earnings. Okay. This was May of 2023. Let me zoom in on that. That's kind of the equivalent of the gap we're looking at today. And so we did get this really wild gap up. It did pull down, gave us a red candle at the close, and then moved up a bit and then just sort of went sideways. So that's not an example of what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is we get this big gap up, and usually we'll see some sort of a little bit of a pullback, a little response to that. In this case, Tesla did not, and NVIDIA did not do that. Let's look at Tesla, because I think Tesla's kind of got a lot of these gaps too. All right, Bill is here. Good morning. And Diane, good morning. Oh, Daniel, good morning. And Diane, yes, before the market opens, I look at the daily, the 4, the 1, the 30, and the smaller time frames. I think that's great analysis, Diane, and I support you in that. I think that's a great way to go about it. Bill, the weekly chart does not show a gap up. Why would the daily chart gap have to fill, but not the weekly gap? That is a great question. You don't really see gaps on the weekly, Bill, and I'll go back and look at that with you in just a second, but let me finish looking for some big gaps here on Tesla and see if I can get an example of what I was looking at, what I was thinking. Okay, so here's sort of an example. Let's look at this. Tesla had this wild gap here, June of 23. Yep, right here. Big gap here, and it did pull down off of its high, gave us a green candle the next day, but then pulled back down. So this is what I'm talking about. This is an example of what I mean. When we see these large gaps, a lot of times we'll get a little bit of a pullback. Not always. You can't count on it. You can't guarantee that, but a lot of times we see it. And it is kind of what we're seeing today. So here's a little bit of another example of that. Gap up, another day up, and then a little pullback. All right. And Bill, let's answer your question about weekly gaps. So this is a great question. Let's go look at weekly gaps. Remember, gaps are formed from the close of the prior period to the open of the current period. So here's an example of Tesla. Do we see gaps on the weekly chart? We sure do. But it's based on, gaps are always formed from the close of the previous period to the open of the current period. So on the daily chart, what that means is yesterday's close to today's open. What it means on the weekly chart is last week's close to this week's open. So in this case, look at the gap on Tesla here in September of 25. We had the weekly closed right here, meaning this is Friday, right? So of this week, the week of 9/8, September 8th, the week closed at 396, right? The next Monday, there was an open right here. This is the open at 422. That creates the gap. That's the gap. Okay. So you don't see daily gaps on the weekly time frame unless there's a gap between Friday and Monday. That's where you see the gaps. Does that help, Bill? Hopefully that helps. Also, look at Tesla. What a dog. What a dog. Not looking good. But yeah, so that's how gaps are formed on dailies and weeklies. And of course, exactly the same thing with monthlies. Where did we close the month versus where did we open the new month? That is exactly how those gaps get formed. Okay. All right. Great questions, everybody. Thank you so much for putting those in there. I love answering those questions. Let's get back over. Let me get to my futures chart. We are getting a little bitty move up here. We like that. Let's get back to our 1 minute and see what's going on here. Up to the VWAP on the futures chart. Now the VWAP is a little bit higher than that on the SPY. Teeny candles, not moving super hard or fast, just tiny, tiny little incremental moves. We like that. I mean, I don't like the tiny moves, but I like this little move up here. All right. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for that question and comment. All right, right here at the VWAP on the ES, let's see what we get. I do need to put my volume profile back on. Helps me see what's going on here. All right. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and see if I can take a look at this volume. We do have some volume here. Right in through here, right kind of where we're at. Gavilan, could we see a gap in the next couple of weeks on Tesla for earnings? Absolutely, we could, Gavilan. Tesla likes to gap at earnings. And you bring up a really good point, Gavilan. Earnings are going to be super important as we move into these quarter one earnings, this quarter one earnings period. This is going to be really, really important. We need to see where the mega tech stocks are going to land in the earnings season. That's going to make or break where we go on the charts. So great point there about earnings, Gavilan. And yes, we could absolutely see Tesla gapping. Right. We've got our VIX currently just really hovering over the last while. We're still moving down on the VIX, which means we're slowly moving up on the charts, and we have been. But the VIX is kind of still hovering in this 21 range. That has been knocked down significantly. The VIX is down 17, almost 18%. That's a huge knockdown on the VIX. However, it's still, believe it or not, over 20 is still slightly elevated for the VIX, and we do still have to be aware of that. All right, Freaky Turkey, good morning. This is the wildest VWAP range I've ever seen on ES. Insane, right, Freaky? I'm with you. Crazy, crazy range today. And you can look at the daily candle and see why that is. It's a huge, huge range on the daily candle. All right. And good morning, Ricky. Thank you so much for joining. Let's see if we can push up through this VWAP here. We have really been pulling down since pre-market at about 7:30 for hours. And now we're getting a teeny, looks like maybe a little bounce off of this bottom, possibly, but we're stalling out at the VWAP here. So let's see if we can get a bit of a move up here. I don't know if we can get much more strength out of this move. Remember, the big move has happened pre-market. Big money made their money and left the scraps for retail, and really not a lot of upward, nothing upward today at all. So very challenging trading when we get these kind of moves. All right. So Nico's saying when the market is choppy as it is now, it is difficult to profit even if the direction is trending up or down. It is, Nico. It is difficult to profit up or down. And you're exactly right. In a choppy market, that is the challenge. When I'm scalping, I'm usually in and out very, very quickly. And even then, sometimes it's just not enough, right? But that is why I do tend to trade rather quickly, especially if I'm going to take a trade in a choppy market. I really do want to be in and out quickly. All right. So let's see. Come on now. Let's see if we can get this push here. This is the MACD's getting a little old and tired here. It's been kind of mostly green for a while, and it just feels like it's a little bit tired, doesn't it? It's starting to come down a bit. Let's see if we can get another little bright green and see if we get a push here toward the VWAP, but it is feeling tired to me. And again, our VIX just kind of sideways, moving up just a little bit here. We want to be careful of a downward move when we see the VIX starting to trend up a little bit. So we could be coming toward the end of this little tiny, this isn't a big upward move. It was actually very tiny, but we could be coming up to the end of that. Let's see what we get here. Price is under, so let's see what we got. Volume kind of trending down a little bit. David Reese, good morning. Welcome. How are you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you for saying hi. I sure appreciate it. All right, so still a bit green. All right, a little bit brighter on the MACD. That's good. We like to see that. Nice little push there. We are right at the VWAP on the ES. Trying to push through here. Let's see if it can. And did we talk about Bitcoin yet? We had a nice move in Bitcoin. You guys know I follow Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is up 71.4K. It is up to 71.4K. Nice move up, still within a sideways range. I'll show you Bitcoin in just a minute. I'm actually kind of watching this run right now, seeing if we can get the SPY to tackle this VWAP here with these teeny little green candles. Nice little move here. But Bitcoin mostly sideways for the last several weeks, kind of inside of a 65 to 75K range. I think we are finding support and potentially a bottom here for Bitcoin. I think we do have a lot of upward room. We've got a lot of space in the overhead compartments for Bitcoin. I think it will continue to move up, but it is sure taking its time in this sideways trench. And I'll show it to you in a minute. Again, I'm really kind of watching this move toward the VWAP here on the SPY. 2.3%. So we're coming off this bottom. I sort of called this bottom here at least a temporary bottom, 67.82. We're up, what, 20, 30 points from there. That's nice. Getting a little bit of a volume push. Look at this bar. See the volume pushing. Let's see if that means we're continuing up or they're going to revert down. It can mean either thing. Usually it means, when I see increased volume, I see us reversing, but it doesn't have to be. It can mean that we're going to get some pressure here to push up. So let's see. Let's see what we get. Teeny, teeny little candle here. No real move yet. Starting a little bit of a red candle. Got our VIX giving us a tiny little green here. All right. Let's see if we can push this VWAP. Let's go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see this white line here is the VWAP. That stands for the volume weighted average price. It's nothing more than a moving average, but it does give us it does take the volume and tries to weigh the volume with the average. So gives a little, why they call it weighted, right? Volume weighted average price. It gives more weight to the prices that have higher volumes. So I like the VWAP. Institutions tend to use the VWAP. So I always chart it, and we're trying to make a run here for it, trying to beat it. Haven't beat it yet, but it's trying. Come on. Let's give it a push. All right, bit of a push here. Coming up a little bit. I'm going to zoom out here and kind of look at this move. So we've got a lot of highs overhead. Are we going to try and reach that again today? I don't know. The daily candle was looking a bit negative earlier, but look at this over the last, hour almost. It's really kind of changing its personality a little bit. We do really need to hold on to this VWAP here. Let's see if it can. If we can hold the VWAP, I could see us climbing a bit more. Last time we tried to hold the VWAP, we lost. So we've been moving down pre-market. We came down through the VWAP. They tried to hold it here right after the open, and then whoosh, we lost it. So this is our first reclaim since the morning, and this is where we need to see it hold. If it holds here, we can continue up. If we lose the VWAP, then we'll probably come back down. Still trying to hold here. Trying. Come on, guys. You can do it. All right, David, I want it to go down. Let's not go. What are you in, David? And good to see you here. What are you trading? Tiny, tiny little incremental moves here. Nothing strong or hard, but consistent. Consistent move up. David is in SPX puts. Okay. All right, David. Well, good luck to you. I mean, certainly could we move back down? Yes, we could. But this is a pretty strong push off the bottom here. What strike are you in? All right. Still fighting here. We haven't won it yet. This VWAP is not won yet. Now, the VWAP on the ES is looking good, but the VWAP on the SPY, we have not beat it yet, but we're trying. We're trying here. All right. 67.65. Okay. You're only 10 points out of the money, so hopefully you'll be okay, David. I hope you'll be okay on those. All right, slow climb. Could we consider calls here? Here's the challenge. I didn't want to take calls below the VWAP. I'm really careful with that. Sometimes I will, but today I didn't want to. Now we do have a break over the VWAP. Could we take a call here? Yes, but the move is old. It's a bit extended here. So how much higher can it climb before we get a little, zigzag, right? The market is always zigging and zagging. So we've had a pretty decent move up. Are we going to get a little zag here before we zig again? And that's why I'm not taking calls here, because we just haven't quite conquered this VWAP yet. All right, freaky. 675 looks like the call wall could shake things up a bit. Let's see, 675. Let me look at the call wall real quick, at least on Gamma, and see where it's at. 675. I do see the call wall at 675 on the Gamma flow. Was freaky. Yeah, I do see the 675 call wall. So you're correct. That could slow things down here for sure. Although we do have a lot of Gamma, a lot of positive Gamma everywhere. 678, 74, 73. Put wall at 658. Bit of a big gap in between those two. All right. So far, still holding this VWAP. All right, David, also, there will be a move in the next 6 minutes. Wait, let's see. What are you talking about, David? Are you talking about FOMC minutes? And those come out today at, I think, 2 p.m. Eastern. We do have crude oil inventories coming out. I don't know that that'll move the market. It doesn't usually, but today it could, with oil being so important. And of course, FOMC meeting minutes at 2. That could also move the market. 12 p.m. Oh, you're just saying there's a move at 12. Okay, sometimes there is. You're right. A lot of times there is. All right, we still haven't beaten this VWAP yet. Look at how it's really trying to hover here. We need a strong, decisive move. Let's see what we get. I wrote it 12 p.m. Okay. All right, there's a little push here. This move is long, so it's getting a little old. I am a little leery. All right, Dan, stopped out of my USO calls with 37% profit. Another good day. Took 4 trades, all 4 green. Congrats, Dan. I did not trade USO, but I am so glad that you were able to have a green day. That makes me really happy. Congrats. All right, we are getting just a little bit of a slowdown. It feels like right here. Such a long move. Kind of tired. Back to the VWAP. Let's see if we try to hold it here or if we break it. If we break it, I'm open to trading puts. If we start to see, we are starting to see the MACD roll over here. So let's see what we get here. This was a nice strong climb. If I were to take any puts, I would be taking puts at the 675 level. No, not quite breaking the VWAP yet. There we go. All right, let's see what we get here with our MACD. There's another little push. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm loading calls at 674. I'm going to go ahead and try the calls. I'm in, punch it at 674. And those are moving quickly in our favor. All right, I'm out at 8%, punch it. Now, again, when I take a trade, it's educational only. You can follow me, but you got to do it at your own risk. I'm just showing you how to take the trades and how I think them through, okay? So what I did on this trade, I just made almost 8% on that. I waited for a clear sign that we had a sign that we had cleared the VWAP, right? So we were kind of doing this little sideways toggle. This candle right here, and then this one gave me the all clear that the MACD had turned red just for a brief second. And then we started getting that little green MACD, and a push up over this little recent top. That's kind of what gave me the clear to just grab a quick 7-8% win. So that was my thought process there. But thank you, Diane, saying nice. Thank you. And that was right at the end of our stream. Glad we were able to take that one. Again, this is educational, so hopefully you got something out of it. I would love it if you want to give it a thumbs up. That'd be super helpful. And come back tomorrow. I'll be here at 11 a.m. Eastern. Remember, Thursday, Friday, tomorrow and Friday, we have big data coming. So be aware of that. We've got PCE and CPI. These are the inflation indicators that the Fed likes to use. Be aware that that's coming. That's important. And we will be back tomorrow after some of that data comes out. So we could see some big movements in the market. Again, also FOMC minutes at 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Craig saying very educational. Thank you, Craig. Okay, Diane, I trade stocks, but interested in transitioning or adding options tomorrow. Can you give any suggestion on where to start my education? Absolutely, Diane. And I appreciate that. I'll talk some more tomorrow. Please remember to say hi and remind me, drop in tomorrow, and I will talk about trading options. That is really very good question. And Diane, thanks for allowing us. Oh, my pleasure, guys. I love trading with you. Love that you're here with me. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I might grab another call here in a minute. And you all take care of yourself. We'll be back here tomorrow. Bye for now. Appreciate you all.